Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. All right, everybody, we're going to dive right into it after a couple of announcements real quick here. This is going to be a double week wrap up. I assume it's going to be very long, so I don't want to take too much time here. My throat doesn't hurt at all, but it is still a little bit phlegmy, so I do have some of my tea left here to get me through this. We do have a new patron to welcome, so I wanted to thank you, Jessica C, for joining my Patreon to support me. That means so much. And I actually have something amazing to announce for my Patreon for the month of December, and you don't have to be a paying member to take advantage of this. You just have to be following my Patreon, which you can do as a free member, you can do as a free trial, any way you want to do that. I'm going to be doing a month of giveaways. So I have both some things that have been sent to me from viewers to host giveaways for. I actually had someone who was like, hey, would you like to do some giveaways with these? And I was like, heck yes, I will. So I've been saving those up, both new and used things. I also have some PR mail that I've received over the year that either I've read it and it wasn't quite for me, but I don't want to like resell those or anything. I want to gift them to someone else since they were given to me. So there's going to be a month of giveaways. My hope is to do about 10. And the way that you're able to do this, like I said, you just need to go to my Patreon down below and be following me there, which again, you can do as a free member. And all of these giveaway posts will be open to the public because something you might not know, at least specifically in my state anyway, you can't host giveaways behind a paywall anyway, but it is okay for me to push you towards my Patreon to at least enter it. There will be a giveaway form in each of the giveaways. You can enter all of them, though once I start doing the giveaways, you know, I'm going to have it a max if someone can win twice. That's just an unofficial thing for me. So you know, I still want to make it so that everyone can enter everything you want, but I'm not going to be drawing the winners until the end of the month when I get back from Christmas break. So I'm just going to keep opening these giveaways for the month of December. When I return from my Christmas vacation, I'll get back, get into the new year, and I'll draw all the winners. And when I do, like I said, I will draw for the prizes in order that they were put out. And once you win, or if you win 2 things, that'll cap you out of it. So yeah, but anyway, there's not any other rules than that. You'll see you just enter the form. They are open international, though since I've made these giveaways, I don't know if any of you are aware, there are some serious shipping issues that are popping up. We don't know how they're going to go. For now, there is a stall to Canada. There's a strike up there. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. So I don't, you know, if you're in Canada, you can enter, but I have no idea when that's going to be over or what, but you can enter at your own risk, let's just say. And if it opens up, you know, by the time I'm doing these drawings, because I don't know how that's going for you guys. You can do that. Also, it is open international, but there is also some changes happening to being able to ship to the EU. I don't fully understand those yet or what that means. So again, you can still enter. And when it comes time to drawing these names, I'll figure out if I'm able to ship to your country or not. Okay. I'm not in control of that, but you're welcome to enter. And if I draw your name for it, I will see if I'm able to ship it there. And if I am, you'll win. So anyway, spend enough time on that. Again, thank you to Jessica for joining as a paid membership, and thank you to everyone who has followed, who is already entering into these giveaways. There's one entered right now. I'm going to have another one up by tomorrow, Sunday, and we'll have them going. So yeah, anyway, like I said, we won't waste any more time. We'll get in because we have quite a lot of books to talk about. All right, so the first one we have to talk about is From Air by Julie Ann. This was an interesting one. So this is a traveling nurse who I think she's like 25 and a smoke jumper who is 35. And they actually end up being unlikely roommates. So when our heroine whose name is Jamie, she moves to this small town in Montana to do a 6-month term as a traveling nurse. And she ends up rooming or staying in a room outside, which is very interesting, with these 3 other kind of like, I wouldn't call them all like young adults because they're honestly all a little bit older than her, but these 3 friends, one of them who is a pilot actually, and one who's a firefighter and one who's a smoke jumper. Okay. And our hero, Calvin, is the smoke jumper, and he very much is a one-night stand type of guy. He doesn't want to have any connections. He's actually had a vasectomy because he doesn't plan to have children. He is completely dedicated to his job, and he has some reasons from his past, some damages why he's chosen to only live this way. And then we also have Jamie, who she not too long ago lost her mother. And so she is very much okay now being kind of a roaming, traveling nurse in this thing. So when she ends up moving into this home to share, there is one main rule, and that is don't fuck any of your roommates, which, is quickly becomes very difficult for her because her and Calvin have this crazy chemistry. They spark off each other so well. But they both have a lot of damage. And surprisingly, it, for both of them, has to do with fires, which was very interesting. This was very emotional. I mean, Julianne, she doesn't let us off easy for anything, but I was very drawn into this. I did listen to an audio for this one that I got from NetGalley, and it was narrated by Ada Sinclair and Nelson Hobbs. I don't think I've heard either of them before, so that's always cool when it's like new to me, people narrating things. But yeah, this is really good. And this book follows them through a good amount of time too, because it does cover both the 6 months when she's living there, and then it also covers some time when they are a long distance situation later on, which is always difficult. It's always hard to have that, but I find that that's also super realistic. There are lots of couples that go through significant amounts of time where they have to be long distance, and so I really enjoyed seeing how this was handled. There is a bit of a mystery going on in the background, not in a suspense type of way, but in a secrets of our past that we don't fully know. So there are some trigger warnings for death, loss of parents and children, cancer, and mental illness, as well as a character with some dementia and things like that going on. I gave this 4 stars. It was a 3 on the spice scale, and it's actually the first in, I think there's going to be 2 books in this series, and I will read the next one. I believe the next one is about one of the other guys who was a roommate there. So, okay. Next up was the Horde King of Shadow by Zoe Draven, and this was a 6-star read that got added at the end of November. I loved this so much. Again, I gush about this a lot in my monthly wrap-up, so I'll have that tagged up there. But this is the first in a new series of hers that is a spin-off series from the Horde Kings of Dakar, but it takes place 200 years later. So I know that I've already had lots of people comment that I have to finish the Horde Kings first. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to wait. Like, of course she wrote it so you can dive right into this one. I know that people are going to have different feelings about if they should really do that or if they need to read it all. I'm telling you, as someone who has read the entire Horde King series, I've read a few of the books multiple times, I don't think you'll have any issue jumping right into this. In fact, I think that that's good sometimes because I personally didn't really love the last 2 books in the Horde Kings anyway. So if I had finished that series right away, I might have waited to read this one. But it's been so long and I was excited for a new Zoe Draven, so I didn't have a problem with it. And in fact, as I said, I freaking loved it because this is a dragon book. Okay, the Horde Kings of Elthika is what it's going to be called, and the Elthika are dragons. Okay, so we have our Horde King in this one, whose name is Sarkin, and he's a dragon rider. His dragon, her name is Zeradin, and the dragons in this world are powered by the Heartstones. Now, the Heartstones are something you would have heard about in the other series, but of course they're reiterated here. They are these items of power. They do different things, but in the scenario of this series, they help power the dragon's magic. And Sarkin, being the Horde King of a horde that has dragons, he needs more heartstones, and he needs to keep their dragons powerful and alive because they are bonded with these dragons, right? They're partners. And he hears that there is this princess named Clara who is able to see where heartstones are, and so he wants her for himself. He doesn't necessarily want her or care to have her, but he knows that he needs her. So he goes to her kingdom and basically threatens the kingdom. You either give me this princess in marriage or I'll burn your village, your kingdom to the ground. So she doesn't really have a choice, and she goes with him. They have a bit of a difficult beginning, not only because this was basically a coerced marriage, and she is very much a bookish princess who would have been happy to stay in the library all of her days, but she does have visions. And she has had visions of dragons before, and she has had visions of heartstones before, just like Sarkin thought that she did. And so, you know, they are going to really butt heads to the start of this. And he also is very demanding about the fact that his queen, she's going to need to be a dragon rider. She's going to need to claim her own dragon. So she needs to be in training for that, even though, again, she's been a bookish girl who's never really left the palace, never left her country. She's been very hidden away for reasons that you'll learn in the book. And there's this big, brash, bold, loud king who's just thrusting her literally into all of this. But yeah, so they very much start out in an enemy scenario, but I loved it. I loved the connection with the dragons. I loved when she was training and learning. There's not really a schooling aspect, but there is like training sequences of learning how to ride a dragon, of course, learning how to claim one, what it's like when you bond with one. It was amazing. Okay, I had so much fun. And I also loved the slow burn romance between the two of them. They do have a physical connection, and in fact, when they get married, there's this like ceremony within these like caves, and there's something that kind of takes over their bodies and pushes them together for the first time, as it were. So they're a bit hesitant about, are we really having these feelings, or was it the magic or whatever? But it becomes very clear where the magic is coming from. Okay, we'll just say that. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved the dragons. I loved his dragon, her dragon. I loved the riding of them. I loved how magical the dragons are. They maintain that feeling of being other in a way that I just really love. So 6 stars for me. It's a 3 on the spice scale. This one does have quite a few trigger warnings. Okay, it has voluntary body modification that gets mentioned. You'll see what I mean by that when you read it. There is parental suicide in the past, not on the page. There's death of a parent by murder, violence, danger, all those types of things. So, all right. Next up was my Patreon read of November. I squeaked it in right before I went on Thanksgiving vacation. So another reason to check out my Patreon is, of course, the exclusive reviews and videos that I have on there. And I read An Optimist's Guide to Heartbreak by Jennifer Hartman. This was my read for our theme of November was office romance. And I will not tell you what this one was about or what I thought about it, because that's exclusive to my patrons. But I did have a lot of complex feelings. This one did have a pretty intense cliffhanger. And I do have the second book. I don't know when I'll get to it, but I did have a pretty good time reading this. I was surprised a little bit right there. So yeah, definitely check out my Patreon if you want my in-depth review of that. All right, then I reread actually Wild by Adrienne Wilder. This was a Patreon read for a supporter there, so I annotated this one. But I read this one, I think it was 2022 that I read this for the first time. And I actually read quite a few books by Adrienne Wilder after I read this. But this is an romance. It is a plane crash situation. We actually start with one of our heroes waking up in the plane crash and hearing a bear come lumbering through the crash, and seeing this bear actually start going for one of the companions from this plane. There are wolves circling as well. And then there is this mountain man, this man wearing these furs, and he discovers that the one man is alive. Now, he was actually scavenging through this plane crash, which you'll find out more about why he needed to scavenge as you read this. But when he finds someone who's alive, he is like, well, I'm going to bring him back with me. Now, this wild man doesn't even have a home out in the woods. He is literally a nomad and survives just out in the wilderness. But he does have one friend out there who has a like summer cabin in the wilderness up there. And because he now has this injured man that he's rescuing, and this man is gravely injured. Okay, we're talking like broken leg, broken ribs, very severely injured. And really, you know, the hero, Keegan, maybe should have just left this guy his name is August, maybe should have just left him to die. But he doesn't do that. He ends up taking him back with him. Now, once August becomes aware and all the pain that he's in, he doesn't understand why Keegan can't just call for help. And he's like, dude, you crashed in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. I can't just call for help. The radio is down. The guy whose house that they're staying in, he only comes in the summer for a few months every year. It's going to be a long time before he's back. You're stuck with me here. So there's a lot of like tension between them in the beginning because we don't know if we can trust Keegan or not. And August has just lost all the people that he was in this plane with. He is actually a like model / you know, I don't know if he was trying to get into acting, I don't know, but he was on this plane with his like boyfriend. He's actually breaking up with his boyfriend during this flight. It was very messy, but they were all kind of some minor celebrities who were on this plane, and they were going to like an event when the plane crashed, and there doesn't appear to be any other survivors from this event at all. So yeah, August is basically stuck with Keegan through the winter in this cabin, and romance is going to build throughout it. This is a very interesting book. There are a lot of feelings that I have about it. It's crazy. But I gave this 4 stars, and it is a 3 on the spice scale. One of the kinks in here, I will say they do switch. This is a top and bottom type of relationship, and they use strange things for lube, being that they are in the wilderness. So I'll say that very interesting. Let's say lots of trigger warnings for this. This is very gory in some aspects. There is violence. There are animal attacks. There is attacks on animals for survival. There is just, yeah, it's a lot. It's very intense. I'd forgotten how intense it was. But 4 stars, 3 on the spice scale. Then the last book that I finished in November was See It Through by Julia Wolf. This one isn't out yet. It comes out on the week that this goes up. It comes out on the 12th. So you're definitely going to want to snag this one for sure. This was another favorite of the month. I gave this one 5 stars, and I talk about it more in detail in my monthly wrap-up. But stop it. What was that? This is the first in a new series, the Kelly Ranch series. It is kind of a spin-off from other series that Julia Wolf has written. And this is the children of Lachlan and Elena from Sweet Like Poison, the nieces and nephews of Saoirse from Sincerely Your Inconvenient Wife. And this is going to be a cowboy small town series. And I'm just beyond excited because I love almost everything I've read by Julia Wolf. Y'all know I have 2 of her books in my favorites of the year, and this one was really good, okay? The only reason, honestly, the only reason this one isn't a 6-star read as well is that I'm comparing her to herself. That's kind of where I'm at with this. I'm comparing her to herself. And the other 2 books I read this year just really got me on a gut punch level. Jump on 3 and In the Details. This is still amazing. It's very, very good, but I have a very high standard for Julia Wolf. And though there aren't things that I'm like gonna, I don't have things to nitpick about this. That's just the truth. On my honorable mentions list for the year, this will absolutely be there. This was wonderful. And for a lot of other people, this is fantastic. So it was wonderful. But this one does start off a little bit of an interesting thing. Our hero, Remington, is coming back to the small town of Sugar Brush. In my head, I was calling this Sugar Bush for a really long time. And then actually reading, it's Sugar Brush, Wyoming is where it is. Or Sugar Brush Ranch is like the name of, no, it's Sugar Brush, Wyoming is what it is. And Kelly Ranch is where they live. And there are 4 brothers and sisters of the Kellys. And Hannah is actually a farrier. And Remington comes back to town to deal with his father's effects. He is actually a photographer who photographs very like intense things, both like for war and in like dangerous places. And he's lived a pretty like interesting life the past few years. But he actually used to be best friends with Hannah's brother. And then he just disappeared kind of. He moved away when they were, once they got out of high school. And it was very tough for people to deal with. And Hannah had been very close with Remy's father for the last few years. She actually became his like partner in his business. Again, she's a farrier, which is a horse hoof doctor, if you didn't know. Shoer and hoofer and all that stuff. And she has like taken over that business for the dad who died. And it appears to her that Remy had ignored all of her efforts to contact him and tell him about what's happening to his father. Now, whether he would have come or not, we'll never know. But there is a reason why he wasn't there when his father died. Part of it is he hates his father. His father was an alcoholic. He wasn't necessarily physically abusive, but he was very neglectful, and Remy spent most of his time with the Kellys, which is why the Kellys are very hurt. Specifically Hannah's brother, and I mean, Elena is a little bit salty about him too. She definitely gives him a hard time a few times, we'll say. That this boy that she had cared for is basically one of her own just up and disappeared, right? But there's a lot of damage that Remy has been through, and the man that Hannah knew the past few years is not the man that Remy knew when he was young. So yeah, there's that they have to get through. And even more so when he's come to town, he's planning to like sell off his dad's stuff and get out of there. He is also though dealing with an injury, which again, may not be why he wasn't there when things went down. He's dealing with an injury, so he is going to stay in town for a while to kind of like deal with what he's had happen. But to his, kind of chagrin and also surprise, his father's effects and business and home aren't left only to Hannah, only to Remy. They're also left to Hannah. They have been given like ownership of all of it. So that means they are sharing everything when they first get there. And Hannah is very much like, get the fuck out of here. I am disgusted with you. You weren't here, blah, blah, blah. So it's a one-sided kind of enemies to lovers scenario. But again, everybody's misunderstandings are understandable, we'll just say. And that doesn't last for long. So anyway, yeah, this was wonderful. Their relationship's great. It ends up that they think maybe they're just gonna fool around until he is better and ready to leave. But, that's not gonna be so easy for him to go. So anyway, moving on from that, I give it 5 stars. It's a 3.5 on the spice scale. There are some fun little kinks. There's breath play, anal play, rough sex, good stuff. Trigger warnings. There is ADHD. Hannah has ADHD. There's grief, loss of a parent, violence, and stalking. This does have a slight suspense plot. Now, what I will say, it is set up through the whole thing. This isn't a thing where like we just have suspense right at the end. There is stuff going on throughout the whole book, and I feel that she handled that pretty well. Now, from what I recall, there haven't really been other Julia Wolfs where she does do that. So, but it was late into this one, and I don't know if she's going to put suspense in like all of them or if it was just this one, but it was good. So yeah, there we go. Those are the books I finished in November. Now let us get into what I've read so far in December, because I've read a lot. All right. There was Marked by Eva Winners. This was another Audible arc that I got. This book is already out. It doesn't appear that the audiobook is available yet. I thought it was supposed to be available by now. It's duet narration by Shane East and Lucy Rivers. And this is the 4th one by Eva Winners that I've listened to in the last 2 months. And I gotta say, I might be tapping out of this because I enjoyed Villainous Kingpin. I even liked kind of Devious Kingpin. And Vow of a Mobster was okay, like I said. That was actually a reread for me. But this one marked the first of the Russian Sinner series. Was too much for me. It had so many of the cringy things that I despise, honestly, of being fully focused on sexual things. They are in dangerous situations in this book, and the hero thinks about his cock in every single one. In every single one where they are in a dangerous situation or lives are on the line, he's thinking about how beautiful her lips would look around his cock, or how hot her ass is, or how sexy she is. Constantly. I was like, what is happening in the story besides he wants to get his dick sucked? Tell me what it is. I'm not seeing it. And again, I'm just so sick of that. And in other books I've read by her, it didn't feel that obvious, or else it made more sense because it was a one-night stand situation or whatever. The scenario in Marked is that our heroine's been kidnapped from a club. She's the daughter of like some important political people, and her mother had actually been kidnapped when she was a child. Her mother died from this captivity. She survived, so she's had a lot of trauma because of that. She's actually a doctor now, and she's on a little trip with her friends. They have bodyguards with them, but she ends up getting kidnapped. And her father calls in a favor with our hero, Dimitri, and his buddies to rescue her. And from the moment that he sees her, I think on the like videotapes to see like where she was taken, he's thinking about how hot she is. And he doesn't even know whether she's been raped or not when they get her back. And he's thinking how hot she is. Like, it was just time and place, bro. Time and place. And then like she's a virgin because she never trusted a man after stuff that happened to her being kidnapped. Like, these two were nonstop wet and slick and hard between them, and it was gross, okay? And I've got to tell you as well, what really nailed that home for me was the fact that I was listening to this book while I was reading See It Through, you know? And the way that Julia Wolf is able to convey attraction and arousal. I talk about this in my monthly wrap-up, I believe, is that she is able to show, in the hero's point of view, Julia Wolf writes arousal as a full body experience before we ever get to the sexual organs, okay? Skin is flushing, the scent of the heroine, the feel of her soft body against his, the way that he feels himself heating up around her, and then finally his dick gets into the game, okay? And I'm making this comparison because it's not, I mean, I do love Julia Wolf. I've said I love so much that she writes, but it doesn't take much to show arousal in a bevy of other ways. Why is it only with his dick that he shows attraction to a woman? So anyway, my point, maybe it's not fair to compare Eva Winners to Julia Wolf, but you know what? They both wrote about the same amount of books, okay? Eva Winners has written a shit ton of books too. And I have now read 4 of her books within 2 months, as I said. And though the sexualization might have fit better in the other books, it does also happen in those. So I rated some of those ones higher. This book I actually tapped out of putting my review in too early because it's a 3-star read for me, if that. I was so not rooting for the hero. The heroine, like, I didn't hate her, but she was also dick drunk very quickly for the very dangerous situation she'd been in. And it's just, it puts a bad taste in your mouth. And I'm just like, you guys are dumb. And if you end up getting killed while you're trying to fuck each other in the middle of this dangerous situation, well, then I'm going to say, well, I hope you enjoyed your last orgasm because you deserved it, you know? So moving on. I didn't mean to talk so long about that one, but I gave 3 stars. 3 on the spice scale. There's kidnapping, death of a parent, mentions of rape, not to the heroine, but in the past, threats of assault, violence. The amount of sexualization was unneeded. Okay, next up, I had actually 2 fan fictions. I was still kind of in the mood for those, and I was also just feeling the stress of a lot of books that I like had to read. You guys know how I get, or maybe you don't, but I do. I start to get a little bit defiant when I have too many books that I have to read. So while I was home for Thanksgiving, after I finished, you know, Marked, and I was just like, ugh, I read a couple of fanfics. So one of these I actually had started a while ago. It was The Perfect Match by Nora Wall. This one was actually kind of an office romance, and Narcissa wants grandbabies. Okay, that's literally what the blurb of this one is Narcissa Malfoy. She wants grandbabies. She is with Lucius in this one. They have a very beautiful marriage in this one. This is after the war. There's already been some punishment for both Lucius and Draco, but they're back to being like businessmen basically. And Draco, he's been doing a lot of like international business and staying away from the family, and Narcissa wants him home, wants him getting married and giving her grandbabies. That's what she wants. Hermione Granger actually works for their business, and she's a lawyer, and she thinks that Hermione would be a good match for her son. So she starts playing some little games against her husband's wishes even. But Lucius and Narcissa actually have some like a lot of scenes together in this one. They're very cute, but he's like, honey, you're pushing it. And she's like, no, this could be. So that's why this is called The Perfect Match, is because she does a little bit of meddling and ends up getting Draco to come home for a thing. And Hermione and Draco have to work together, I think, for a specific project with the company. And Narcissa is very sure that if she just gets these two around each other again, it's been many years, she's like, they will work. And she's not wrong. So these two start seeing each other, what they think is secretly, even though, of course, as we said, Narcissa kind of set the whole thing up. So this is a bit of a longer one. It is over 500 pages. It was long, but I liked it. It was very spicy. They discover they have a lot of similar kinks together, which is great. Hermione's actually a bit more of the experienced one. And so there are some scenes where like she likes being in control. She was in a BDSM relationship before, but she was the submissive then. Though her dom at the time had actually let her do some things to him to like see what they were like, but he never really liked it, but she did. So now in a relationship with Draco, they actually start kind of playing a little bit, and I really like it. So there's some cock warming that is actually a punishment for him, where she's like, you just need to sit still and let me like sit here, be my throne. Like, it was great. So there's some edging, and they do switch sometimes. It's great. And it was really good. I like that one. So I do recommend. Remember, I don't rate my fan fictions anymore. I recommend. It was hot. I'll have a link down below. Then I read Trusting the Enemy. This one was a lot shorter. I didn't care for this one as much. This one was a marriage law. And it's actually one where like Lucius wants Draco to be married to Hermione because he thinks it will help him get more freedom from his, I think he's under house arrest from his crimes. And he thinks that having a daughter-in-law who works for the ministry would help him out. But Hermione and Draco are not going to be like manipulated by him. So he ends up not being too happy about it. So this was all right. I don't necessarily recommend this one. It was just okay. All right. Then we have these two wrongs. So we have another Julia Wolf. This one I was annotating for one of my patrons. This one is book 2 in the Savage Academy series. This one is another one that has a unique sport in it. This one has fencing. The hero in this one, his name is Reese Astor. And he's a bit of a, well, he wants people to think he's this very aloof, kind of playboy type, but he definitely has inner like nerdy goodness to him. But in the beginning of this, his roommate Charles wants to get with Evelyn, who is Delilah's twin sister, and Delilah is very protective of her sister. Her sister is on the spectrum pretty highly, and in fact her sister's been bullied quite a bit for that, and they've actually ended up at Savage Academy because they left other schools where her sister was very bullied, and even like her family doesn't understand her very well. And so like Evelyn and Delilah are kind of all that each other has. So when Charles decides that he wants to sleep with Evelyn, he enlists Reese, who I said is his roommate, to keep Delilah busy. There happens to be this, what's the reason they go on this thing again? I don't know. They go on this retreat type thing, and Delilah ends up kind of letting herself be distracted by him, and they end up having like a hookup where Reese does a bad job, okay? Which I always say I like, because they are 18-year-olds. Like, they're not going to be sex gods. But he does a bad job. So much so that Delilah, who she was having fun to start with, because they were playing, they were smoking a little weed, it's very sexy. Once he gets in there, she says, I felt like a fleshlight. I felt like a pocket pussy. You didn't pay any attention to me. So he leaves that encounter thinking it was really great, because he got off, and she's like, that was dehumanizing, and I hated it. And so later on, when, again, he's supposed to be distracting her again, he tries to flirt with her again, and she's just like shutting him down. She's like, if that was a good sexual experience for you, like, I don't want to. And he is shocked, actually, and very confused, and thinks, what did I do wrong? And finally, after him like poking at her, she's like, you sure you want to know? Because like, I'll tell you why I'm annoyed with you. And he's like, yeah, I can take it. And she says basically what I said. She's like, you didn't pay any attention to me. You didn't even try to get me off. I was enjoying it, and then you just went for the goal. You didn't look me in the eyes while we were doing it. You didn't make me feel pretty. You made me feel like you were using me for my pussy, and that's it. And he's upset, but then also is like, wow, I mean, this girl's telling me that. And he does this kind of humble thing where he's like, I want you to teach me, because I don't feel that way. I think you're beautiful and so sexy, and part of the reason I lost it because you're so beautiful. Please show me how I can be better. And at first she's like, no, I'm not going to do this. But eventually she agrees, and she's like, we're not going to have sex until you make me feel like I want to. So they do a lot of other things to get her to the point where she feels that way. And through that, they fall very much in love. But there's this threat looming overhead where the reason he first started doing something with her is because his roommate paid him to distract her. So every day he goes not telling this girl he's now in love with about it, that's hanging over our head. But he had a reason for being paid, and I can understand as a teenage boy at least why you'd be afraid to explain that. So there's that. I still love this so much. This book, These Two Wrongs, was the book that actually started the train of just like banger after banger after banger for her. Like, I liked Save One Thing, like, okay, like it was okay for me, but the way that things came out, it was well, I think Sincerely Your Inconvenient Wife came after Save One Thing. So it was like Sincerely Your Inconvenient Wife, These Two Wrongs, P.S. You're Intolerable, Jump on 3, Yours Truly, in the, like, bam, 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 bam. Like, they've all just been winners since that. And especially revisiting this one now, I liked it even more. So it's a 5-star read for me. Let's see, 5-star read for me, a 3 on the spice scale. And then there is body shaming, both from other people and kind of to herself. There's a very powerful scene from Delilah. She is, I wouldn't call her like plus size, but she's not the same size as the other girls in high school. There is abusive step parent and neglectful parents as well. All right, we got to keep it going because my voice is deciding. It doesn't even hurt, you guys. I'm just losing it, so we got to keep going. Okay, then I had a audio archivist as well as a physical copy of this one, of Keep Me by Sarah Kate. This one just came out. I like this one a lot. This was a marriage of convenience in Scotland, where our heroine, she's actually an American. In the beginning, she ends up in a place she shouldn't be, and she interrupts something that's happening for Killian in one of his hookups. And it turns out that he's this like eclectic rich man who refuses to leave his family home. He's a bit of an agoraphobic. And after this incident, she actually discovers her boyfriend, who she'd originally came there with, is cheating on her. And she's a bit of a troubled child as well, where like her parents are artists and they've like cut her off. So she doesn't have any money and she's in a bit of a tight spot anyway. And so she gets reached out to by Killian's sister, saying that there's this thing, legality, where if Killian's married for like a year, then, you know what? I'm not even going to try to explain the rules of it because it will sound dumb. To the way that I explain it will sound dumb. I know that's strange, but you just have to read that part of it. Either way, they end up in a marriage convenience for a year. And her kind of directive from his family is to try to get him ready to leave the place. And if she can kind of help him in this year that they're married, she will get a payout at the end of it. And they really hate each other in the beginning. But eventually they start to get to know each other better. He's into some elements of BDSM. She discovers in rooms there are like straps tied to the headboard and things like that. So eventually they decide to like hate fuck each other because they're like, hey, we can't cheat on each other or else, you know, we'll lose. They have to be faithful to each other for a year or whatever. But she discovers that him and his friends used to have kind of these like sex parties where they would share each other. And previously, he was always single at these parties, so they were a bit more fun for him back then. But now he's feeling pretty possessive when they end up actually hosting one of these parties at his manor. But anyway, they slowly fall in love. And then what will happen when the truth comes out at the end, blah, 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 blah. So I gave this one 4 stars. I really liked it. The narration was really good. It was narrated by Will Watt and Kelly Tager, also 2 names I didn't know very well. But my issues with this one were actually that I could tell that this was written for TradPub before, you know, like it wasn't an indie book of hers that was then made TradPub. I can tell this was written for TradPub, okay? I'm just being honest with you. There are a lot of things about Sarah Kate's writing that I adore, and I feel like she neutered herself for this book, okay? Controversial, but I feel like it's true. Mostly because why did we make it that he's into BDSM and then a lot of the BDSM elements weren't even in here? You know, I'm like, why do we even make them a thing if they're not in here? Well, we made them a thing because Sarah Kate's well known for her BDSM books, but it's like, you know, they just weren't there. Like we, again and again, it's talked about the fact that he used to share with people. And now he's too possessive to let anyone like kiss his wife. Like, why didn't we have a sharing scene? I know I'm not saying that I like love those, but like they're set up and then we don't do them. And it's talked about how much he needs control to like help him. And there's like one scene where he ties her to the bed and one scene where he spanks her. And I was just kind of like, why did we pitch this? Why is there a warning in the beginning for BDSM elements? And we hardly did anything. Like, I don't know. So my issue was that I felt like she was neutered for the story. And I don't know whether she self did that or not, because a lot of her books that have been like republished by them, they've been as is very sexy books. And I'm like, we just shouldn't have made this be about BDSM then. Like, it didn't have to be. But I don't know. I felt like it was neutered. So I gave it 4 stars. The narration was pretty good. It was a 3 on the spice scale, and it did have trigger warnings for agoraphobia, death, alcoholism, PTSD, and parental neglect. All right, next up was Forever the Highlands by Samantha Young. I listened to the audio of this, which was duet narration by Shane East and Zara Hampton Brown. They've done the whole series. This was amazing. This was the last book in the series. I was actually surprised yesterday when I received a copy from Valentine PR. I didn't even get my arc from Valentine PR. I received it from Must Love Audio. So this was a really sweet surprise for it. They sent me a finished copy with a signed bookplate. And then there was an art print of Ellie and Fife. and then this really cool like invitation to a rap party. Because our heroine is an actress and then a screenwriter eventually. So it says, that's a wrap. Come celebrate the end of the season with your hosts. So this was really beautiful. So thank you so much to Valentine PR for sending me this. But I did get an audio, as I said, from Must Love Audio to review. I've reviewed books 4, 5, and 6 from the series. I haven't read the first 3. I do want to go back and read those. But I got... Skies Over Caledonia was one of the first books I got from Must Love Audio. So I just jumped into the middle of a series. It was my first Samantha Young, and I loved it. So yeah, this whole series takes place in the Highlands and this small town called Craigmore, or Ardnach, sorry. Cranesmore is from Outlander, Ardnach. And in this one, it's a brother's best friend, as well as he was basically raised with their family. And she's had a crush on him forever. And this story kind of takes place with, she is currently an actress in the beginning of this. And he works for the security company, or he owns the security company, I believe. And Fife, he is attracted to Ellie as well. But he's not going to do anything about that because he doesn't want to mess up his relations with this family who's been so good to him. And so at one point early on in the story, she actually makes a move and says that she likes him, and he has given her some mixed signals. They have kissed each other before when they were drunk, and she's finally like, I just want to tell you, like, I want to be with you. And he turns her down because he's afraid of ruining relationships. So then she pulls back and she's like, okay, fine. But then I can't talk to you much because it hurts too much. But not too long after that, it's a little ways longer. He gets a baby daughter left on his doorstep. So a woman that he had been seeing 2 years ago, she leaves basically an 8-month-old baby girl that he was never told about, but it's too much for her. She leaves this baby on his doorstep, and now he's a single dad. And Ellie and him, like I said, they're in kind of a weird place because she's trying to move on from him, and he is trying to be respectful of that. But as soon as she finds out about his little girl, she's like, we're here for you. Not only me, my whole family's here for you. And then that does cause him to see her in a new light. And now she has to decide, is he seeing me that way because he really is, or is he just looking for a mom for his little girl? So I really like this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. It had a lot of stops and starts, and that's why that was a bit frustrating. But you know what? Life is that way sometimes, so I do get it. It was a 3 on the spice scale. There is some trigger warnings for child abandonment, stalking, a child in danger, and blackmail in this one. Okay, next up there's King of the Cage by Millie Kane. This is the first in a new duet, though this doesn't have a cliffhanger, right? In the same way that Unholy Vows is the first in a duet, but it is its own story. The next book in this is going to be about a different person. But this is Irish meets the Italian Mafia in this. And our heroine, Giada, she is from the Italian Mafia. She's actually a hacker. She's a bit of a black cat heroine. And then we have Brandon, who is a younger son in the Irish Mafia. And they actually meet at Renato's wedding. So Renato is the hero of Unholy Vows. And they're trying to have peace with the Irish. And Giada, she ends up actually pretending to be dating Brandon to get some Italian guy off her back. And so she sits on his lap and like kisses his neck, and he is done for. Where she was just kind of using him for the moment, he's now like, girl, you're mine. And he actually ends up fighting that asshole later that night in her honor. And he's like, in reward, I want you to be waiting for me because I want you as a reward. And she's like, no. And he's like, don't worry, baby, I'll find you. So he does end up finding her later on because he does fight the guy and beat the shit out of him. And then she has like left by then. So he does end up finding her later. And it turns out, though, there's more going on in this than just that. There is this secret society that they discover has this new drug that they are sending around that is very dangerous. It's called Z Juice, and it's basically a hyped up version of a date great drug, okay? And both Brandon and Giada have different loved ones that have a run-in with this drug. And so her on her hacking side and him on the Irish Mafia side are trying to look into this drug. And they end up in a scenario where they pretend to be together again, and are initiated into this secret society that is selling this drug. And to really sell it, as well as the fact that Brandon is sure that she's the one for him, he maybe kind of sort of forces her into a marriage with him so that they can really sell their cover story for sure. I loved this book. Okay, I really, really did. And I'm happy that I did. There were a few things that got a little too bonkers with this one, but it was so good. And it reminded me why I like Mila Kane so much. The last few books I've read of hers that were her hockey romances, I was not loving them. This was great. I give this 4.5 stars, and it's actually like in my top Mafia books that I've read this year. It was great. So yeah, this one had size difference going on. He's this big, bulking Irishman, and she's this tiny little Italian girl, and he's got a big dick, and it has Make It Fit in here. There's also like Ride My Face. There's also, as I said, black cat, feral golden retriever going on. It was wonderful. There are a lot of trigger warnings though. As I said, there is, you know, involuntary drugging, human trafficking, secret societies, rituals, and more like that. So, but I gave it 4.5 stars and 3.5 on the spice scale. Okay, then I read A Ship of Bones and Teeth by Karina Halley. I narrated this, or not narrated, I didn't narrate it. I annotated this for a viewer, or for a patron, and I had put off reading this book for a long time because though I still try to support Karina Halley, I haven't really liked a lot of her newer books that I've read, but I was glad I was forced to read this because this was great. This was Pirates of the Caribbean meets A Little Mermaid myth, and there are vampires and ghost pirates, or like skeleton pirates, and there are sirens and krakens, and this was just crazy. And again, I can't go into depth about it right now. I'm barely holding on right here, but I ended up really liking it. I gave it 4 stars. It was very sexy, I'll tell you. It was very sexy. There was a lot of some like crazy stuff in here. There was spanking and bondage and, you know, blood sharing, and there is a lot. There's trigger warnings for branding, which you guys know I don't always like. I usually hate, actually. But it actually worked in this one for a specific reason you'll have to see. It also had female rage in a way that I usually don't like reading that. But in this one, it was set up why there was. And so it worked for me. There is loss of a child, grief, mutilation, body horror. There was a lot in here. Like, oof, this was intense. But I gave it a 4 star. I enjoyed myself. Okay, then there was The Holiday Clause by Anne Einerson. This was a cute holiday novella of hers. There's not too much to say. It fits into her, what's the series called? The Aspen Grove, though this one doesn't take place in Aspen Grove. It takes place in a different city. Fallon is the best friend of our heroine, and Fallon will be the hero in If You Give a CEO a Chance. And so she's in like text communications with the heroine Lila in this one. And Lila and Brooks, Lila is it's her brother's best friend is who Brooks is. And her brother is getting married. And so over Christmas, and they end up working on the wedding together, as well as sharing a cabin. So only one bed, cute pet companion. This was fun. 4 stars, 2.5 on the spice scale. Okay, then I finally finished one of the best fantasy series I've read in a long time, though this isn't romance. I finished Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. I completely understand why everyone loves the series. I also know why everyone is devastated when they finish the series, but it was amazing, okay? She did such a good job, like, making this series come back around. I am so in love with the Call family. There's this one quote that just really stands out to me from the whole series. And if you've read the series, you know what I mean, what it means. And it says, "Far do your enemies flee, call Jenn, and may the gods shine favor on no peak." And that seems like such a simple line, but if you've read the series, you know what it means. This is a like generational saga. And so the way that are, in my opinion, the Call Gen 3, like these main 3 siblings who start off this series, we see them from the age of their like young and mid 20s to their 60s. Okay, so that is why this is a hard series for me as a romance lover to read, because if you're seeing people from their young to their old, it's not necessarily going to be a happily ever after for everybody. You're going through life and loss and rebirth and death. Like, you're going to see all of those things. And I like us to stop before then. I like us to stop where we're married and we kiss and we have our babies and then we're done, right? But I was so compelled by this family and by what the legacy of the Green Bones will be by the end. Seeing which of the second generation of this family, who they kind of represent from the beginning, right? There are a lot of parallels between this second generation, which there basically ends up being 3 of them by the end, that kind of represent their mothers and fathers and uncles and aunts by the end. Was just fascinating. The way that there's kind of an enemy this whole time through the series, right? And when I finished the series, there was 2 things that I really thought. I thought, wow, what was this series like from that enemy's point of view? That was one thought I had. And the other thought I had was how different the wars that they were fighting were, even though it's the same war against each other, how different the things they were fighting for were, and yet the same. And the fact that Fanfiction did that is just, it's amazing. And if you've read it, you know. You will cry, though. If you have even an ounce of a soul like me, you will weep. And then you will be like, I don't want to read fantasy ever again. I just want to read romance. That's how I feel. There's a reason why I only read like 1 fantasy a year. And Jay Kristoff was supposed to be my 1 this year. And then Big Sis got me sucked into this. And I'm so happy that I did. Like, I don't regret it at all. The tears were also cathartic because the story was just so good. And when I finished the last line, I wanted to start over immediately. Like, as soon as I finished it, I was like, because there's a specific location within this series that sees us through a lot. There's this one restaurant called the Twice Lucky. It's in a shady part of town. It changes allegiance and alliance throughout the series, but it was always a place that the Calls would go and have family dinner, have a business meeting, whatever. And at the very end of this book, to have a certain character going back in there and like he's in a taxi. No spoilers. I'm not going to name any names of who it is or who's still around or whatever. But the taxi guy's like, you're going to the Twice Lucky. Is that place still around? Like, that has really made it through some shit. And he's like, there's some serious stories about the clan from that place, don't you know? And our character, who is a part of said clan, is like, yeah, I bet you could tell me some stories. And he like goes in. And I was just like, the stories that we've heard, this storyteller is amazing. And she doesn't have anything else out really except for, I believe there's some sci-fi books that she's written. It's called XOXO and Crossfire. So I may check those out because this was amazing. And there's also the Jade Setter of John Loon, which is like a novella. So I need to read more from Fonda Lee. I am not emotionally ready to do it right now, but I will be. I will be, because the type of storyteller she is exceptional, especially because none of this is first person point of view, which often makes it hard for me to emotionally connect with characters sometimes. Not impossible, but it's harder. And the way that I am so deeply connected to Hilo and Shay and Lon and Andon and Nico and Wen, like I love them all so much, even without ever being like directly in their heads. I knew how they were going to react to things. I knew, and that's a talent. That's a talent to be able to do that, for sure. Okay, and the last book that I finished was another 5-star, which I loved. And I read Bourbon and Secrets by Victoria Wilder. I just squeaked this in, finishing it on release day. This came out yesterday, or Friday the 6th, whenever you're watching this. And this is the next book in the Bourbon Boys. And this one is about our single dad, Lincoln. He has 2 little girls. And it is about Faye, who's actually an undercover private investigator who is partnering with the FBI. And she's undercover as a burlesque dancer. She also is from the town of Fiasco. And she kind of left under some dubious circumstances. And she was actually threatened by Lincoln. Don't ever come back. I don't ever want to see you again. I won't get into why that was happening or whatever. But they weren't actually ever together. This wasn't a, like, spurned love or anything, but a lot of shit happens on the day that Faye leaves town. There's a murder, there's like a cover-up, there's all these things happening. But now it's been 5 years and she's back in town as a burlesque dancer who's doing a short, what's it called when they're like an residency at a club in town. And she is, doing some dances there. And when Lincoln finds out that she's back in town after having threatened her, he's like, what could possibly induce her to come back to town? She also has her sister Maggie, who lives in town, who is not happy to see her. And there's just a lot of bad memories and bad blood that's all built up here. But she is there, as I said, as a private investigator. Like, she wears like a like pepper spray in her garter and like has like secret cameras put in her jewelry. Like, she is there for a purpose. And it was really great to watch. Also, their relationship is so hot. It starts off very much as like animosity because there's still that stuff from the past, but watching them connect, like their chemistry just sizzles. It's so good. And I just loved so much about the both of them. There's also some really great stuff because once he once she's back and things are happening, I was afraid he was going to be too possessive over her job. Not only the private investigating part of it, but also that she is a burlesque dancer and people see her in just little nipple tassels and with her ass showing. And he is possessive of her, but he's also possessive in the way of like, yeah, you guys can all look, you can all be jacking off to her, but I'm taking her home and I'm going to be the one whose face she sits on tonight. Like, that's the kind of energy he has. And I just love it so much. And there are multiple scenes where like she gets really worked up from doing her show because she knows she's hot. She feels good in her body. And having everyone, she's a bit of a voyeur, just a little bit. And so having all these men and women like be attracted to her gets her real hot to go home to her man sometimes. And it is great. And there's even a couple scenes, not where they're doing anything sexy because they're in the bar where she's performing or whatever, but she'll use him as a prop sometimes for some things, and it's pretty hot. So anyway, I love them. So yeah, I gave this 5 stars as a 4 on the spice scale. They had some bourbon and spit play happen, which was so hot. Like, oh God, it was great. Also, not so much where she's like in charge, but they'd have scenes where he's like, tell me what you want me to do. And she'd be like, I want you to please me. And he's like, yes, please. Love it. There are 2 different dry humping scenes that I was sweating. They were so hot. I love them so much. Spanking and a little dash of voyeurism, as I said, because there's something that front people. And then trigger warnings, there are a lot. There's violence and death on page. There's gore. There's violence towards women talked about. Discussion of a deceased parent. And there's discussion of, though it's not on page, of animal death and cruelty. So I loved this. It was great. It wasn't quite a 6-star book for me. It didn't quite live to that, but I loved it. I gave it 5 stars and it was a 4 on the spice scale, as I said. So, okay. I was supposed to film 2 other videos today, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. I need to wrap this up here. I need to drink some more tea and see, but thank you so much for watching. Again, just a reminder, make sure you're following my Patreon, even if it's as a free member, because I have some giveaways going up there. I should say this too, it is 35% off my Etsy shop for another few days. So definitely check that out if you're interested. That is the lowest that I go every year because I just can't go any lower to make any money back at all, but 35% off is nothing to sneeze at for sure. So thank you so much for watching, friends. I love you so much. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel for more, and we'll see you next time.